Episode 4. Normally I call this like a review, reaction. This is more of like an unboxing. Man, where do you begin with this episode? Jeez. It's a mixed bag. This episode was really... A lot of things came to a head in this episode that have literally, since like the first episode of the series, been kind of building to a point. So we'll kind of get our reviews out of the way here. The animation for me in this episode is really, and I always harp on the animation when it comes to JC Staff, but the animation was really hit or miss for me. The parts that needed to be really tense and really well lit and really dynamic were really well done. But if I'm honest here, when it came to the action, there were a couple moments that were spot on. A couple moments that looked really good. But then there were a couple moments that were really like jittery and almost... I've harped on the fact that this studio has a real hard time with keeping up with the pace of the animation. And this episode isn't like a good example of that per se, but there is a really good moment that when Bella's kind of leaping between the buildings, chasing Hegney, and as kind of comes to the roof and discovers Hegney. But nevertheless, you could tell very clearly that this episode is animated in a lower frame rate. And it's not always the case, which is what's really frustrating. Sometimes the animation does a really good job of portraying action, and sometimes it doesn't. And it's a bit frustrating for me. I keep teasing a video. I've got a video in my mind. I just haven't had a chance to get it out. But basically, we have tools, we have things at our disposal where they could very easily fix these problems. And as a fan of the series, I just want to see them do a little better here. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. So I guess what we should really do here is just kind of not focus on the quality, because I will say I think it would be really hard to score this episode, because really everything on this episode is about the story. And the story is what really shines here. So when we left off, Belle and Seer were in this hotel room, and it was inevitable. Belle and Seer are going to have to share a bed, and even at the beginning of the episode, Belle's like very nervous about it. He's like, no, I'm going to have to, I'll sleep on the floor, you take the bed. And she gets really manipulative. And the first moment here that really solidifies what's going on is when Seer tries to use the charm skill, or charm, I guess skill for lack of a better way to put it, against Belle. And we already know he's immune to that. That is not going to affect him. So that's like the first moment where you kind of go, ah. And it's always been, if you know anything about mythology, a lot of what's happening here makes a ton of sense. But I'm sure they're going to explain it in a little bit more detail later, but it's pretty obvious at this point what exactly is going on. But Seer essentially tries to seduce Belle in any way she can. Tries to like use the charm skill, doesn't work, obviously. Belle's immune to that. Basically tries to guilt him into it. Like, Seer is going full Diddy mode here. Like, everything and anything to break Belle down. It's man. And it doesn't work. It flat doesn't work. Belle resists her at every step of the way. And she even mentions, she's like, didn't you essentially ask him straight up, like, didn't you get it on with Ryu in the dungeon? And he I mean, we know that that's technically, we joke about it, but it's not the case. Like, they literally were just cold. They had to do what they had to do to survive. It wasn't a romantic or even like a physical thing. It was literally just a survival thing. Um, and I guess that's the thing Ryu's never really been open about. And it's pretty obvious that Ryu has feelings for Belle. I mean, 100% after that. Like, she was even awkward in that episode after the fact. But now, in fact, later on in the episode, we do get a confrontation with Ryu, and she's just having a mental breakdown about that Seer's going off with Belle and all this stuff. I don't know if Ryu knows the full extent of what's happening here, but she knows enough to at least be aware of what's transpiring. So, the long and the short of it, you know what? We'll continue on, kind of like recapping the ep, because it essentially, eventually they go to sleep, and when Belle awakes, Seer's not there, and he goes on a quest to find her. Now, if you remember, she has that little hairpin, and he finds a piece of it on it. Well, we know by the episode. If you haven't watched the episode, spoilers, but make sure you watch the episode first. He finds his half on the dresser, but they were led to believe through the episode, if you're the really keen eye, probably figured it out, but we're led to believe in the episode that it's actually the piece that she would have had and that she left it behind. But actually, there's a distinct difference in the designs of them, and the really keen-eyed people there may have seen it. Either way, they did a really great job of depicting that in the episode. I really, that's why I'm like, the animation's a mixed bag, because they did a really great job of hiding details in the episode. They do a great job with the story aspect of it. And this is a great example of an episode that I think JC staff is really good at doing. And that is details, lighting, drama. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I really like out of the studio. And so this is one of those rare episodes where I'm very happy that they actually have this franchise, because little details like that is where they excel. They're a very old school studio, but there's, if you go back 10, 15 years in anime, this is kind of the way things just genuinely were. Maybe probably actually a little older than that, but still, I'm going like real classic on this. And a lot of the notes from this episode give me a lot of really classic anime vibes. And when I say classic, I mean like we're going back to the 90s for some of this stuff. Some of my favorite series from when I started getting into anime. So, Belle's on this quest, and actually he winds up running into Hegni, like we talked about, and then he actually runs into Otaro at one point, which is its own thing. And Otaro kind of gestures that, hey, what you're looking for is over yonder. Never really says anything. I mean, it's Otaro. He just kind of, merely by existing, he just does what he does. It's really, he's just got a presence about him. But the girls from the tavern, they kind of all have caught on with all what's going on, and they wind up meeting with Belle. Belle meets up with Seer, and a big battle ensues, right? The Freya Familia is now after her. There was that whole mention, if you go back an episode, or go back to the beginning of the series, or season, not series, that's a long ways to go back. If you go back to the beginning of the season, there was a mention between Freya and Seer that, like, if this doesn't work out, it's going to be bad. And for what we perceive at this point, it looks like it is going bad. The Familia looks like it's hunting Seer down. And actually, all the wait staff gets involved. Like, even Anya and Chloe get involved. And this is the first time I think in the series ever, at least this series, that we have actually seen Anya and Alan interact, and they're siblings. And they act like siblings, but they are siblings. And I don't think ever once in this series. I mean, actually, for what's really funny, I think for the anime, this is the actual reveal of that relationship. Now, if you're read the novels, even if you go back and play the Danmachi Mori Freeze game, I think even Don Kuro's mentioned it a couple times, we know that they're siblings. This is not a big reveal. But for the anime, this is actually a massive reveal. So it's just very, very interesting all the way around. But nevertheless, the Freya Familia versus the waitstaff is just, it was never going to be a thing. It was never going to work out in their favor. Everything they were trying to do was bound to fail. And unfortunately, even Ryu took like a huge hit from Agni. It's really intense. Also, I do love that they nail Hegni's character here. Like, he's very dark, he's brooding, he's like everything you would expect a dark elf to be. I think in the novel, though, I think maybe it's just the way he was written. I expected him to have just a darker complexion, but that's me. I think they even call it, if I recollect, I think they called it like an onyx complexion, but it doesn't really matter. It's neither here nor there. But then he turns out to just kind of be a goofball, which is hilarious. But when he gets serious, he gets serious. He just, everything he says is in like, I don't know, almost like an enigma wrapped in a riddle, wrapped in satire. It's really, he's a strange character. But yeah, so the Freya Familia essentially just wipes the girls out. Like, they're like, Chloe's on the ground bleeding, Lunar's on the ground bleeding, Ryu's been almost like just gashed from like, like almost from like her shoulder down to her midsection, and diagonally too. Like, that was a hell of a hit, and it's a bloodbath. And Anya gets up, and that's when she confronts Alan, and you finally get that interaction. And it's just, Alan's very cold, but he just kind of always is. Dude stands on business. Best way I can word it. But that's when you find out, because they eventually corner Seer, and then you find out that it is Seer, but it's not. You find out that Seer is her original name, but that she kind of made a deal with Freya, and she kind of becomes Freya's, for lack of a better way to put it, avatar when Freya's MIA. And it's the reveal that it's Horn, but Horn is essentially, her original name was Seer, and when she was very, very young, she made a deal with Freya proper, and that's when she got the looks and all that good stuff. So it's really interesting. Like, it's very, very convoluted, but essentially, she kind of acts as an avatar for Freya, and you'll find out, I think, eventually a little bit more. I think they do another. I think they'll talk about it a little bit more here shortly, because it's very cryptic at the end of the episode. I'm not going to. I think they're going to go a little further into this. I'm trying to remember when when the full explanation's out there. But there's just a lot going on. Like, it is. When I said, like, we have to unpack. And in fact, I may have already said too much. I know light novel people are losing their minds, but I'm trying to think of a way to kind of describe it without, like, spoiling the rest of the series. And I may already have. But yeah, it's crazy. Most of you have probably already picked up on what's going on. Some of you are probably very confused. And believe me when I say it's not an easy explanation. The explanation is really crazy, but once it happens, it'll make a ton of sense. But overall, while I did criticize the animation, the places that were right were like 10 or 11. The places that were wrong were like 6 or 7. But the story is like 15 out of 10. And it's doing a really solid job of taking a complex idea and actually putting it into an animation format, which is not an easy task. So, while I normally criticize JC Staff, and I did even earlier in the episode, I will say what they're doing is working, at least for this episode. It's the one place they do actually excel, and that is in the drama and the lighting and the pacing and all that stuff. Like that this is their wheelhouse. Like an episode like this, 100% their wheelhouse. And I think this season is one of those seasons where they're really going to shine. I think I mentioned that earlier in the episode, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. I keep threatening to do that video, and I will do that video. Just right now, things are a little weird because I have like 1,000 projects going on. But we will come back. We will talk about that because it definitely warrants talking about. I'm sure I missed a few things, but all in all, I love this episode. I can't wait for episode 5 because reasons. All I'll say is if you haven't figured it out, you are in for a ride. But nevertheless, guys, like, comment, and share, and we'll be back with more here really soon.